All right, welcome. This is the Something Ventured podcast. I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. This is a real brief intro I'm going to do here. This time we're talking to Mike Stutz. Everyone really enjoyed that podcast. I guess L.A. and Hollywood are endlessly fascinating to everybody. So we talked about reality TV. We talked about the responsibility of consumer internet companies and television programs that entertain people, but also have an impact on how, you'll hear about this in the podcast. This is part one of two. We decided to break it into two because we went a little long, an hour and 20 minutes, something like that. And we're trying to keep these things to about 30 to 35 minutes every week, every Tuesday morning. So anyway, here it is, Mike Stutz, part one. Thank you very much for listening to the Something Ventured podcast. All right, welcome. This is the Something Ventured podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. I'm your host. My guest, again, this is the Los Angeles edition, is Mike Stutz. Welcome.
I'm very glad to be here.
How are you doing?
In my house.
In your
Thanks for having me.
You killed the radio illusion. You mean, we call the studio the house.
Yeah, exactly. Here from high atop the Palace Hotel. You can hear the clinking of champagne glasses.
The big house. This is the Something Venture podcast, in which I explore the reality behind the Silicon Valley headlines as I sit down with the people who are shaping the way we view the world online and beyond. I should have you record that for me. And then professionally put music behind it.
All right.
That's the most isn't that's what a professional would do?
No, I think it's cool, though, the way you rattle it off each time.
I don't rattle it off most times.
And
I bumble it off a lot.
It gives the fans something. He said a couple of the words different.
Yeah, I'm going to Twitter. I heard a mistake on the radio.
Yeah.
I saw a mistake on the internet. So your last podcast was one of my most popular.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you to all the listeners.
Yeah, all the listeners.
Clearly, with not much else to do with their lives.
Strangely, it's actually been downloaded more than 1,000 times. Wow. And I'm like, do I have 1,000 friends? I don't think so.
It's just me over and over. I wanted to boost my numbers. I understand ratings, sir.
Getting the ratings up. Yeah, it's been so people loved your podcast. And the funny, I've done racism in Silicon Valley, sexism, all kinds of things. People are like, yeah, but Hollywood's cool.
Yeah, it's just all the name dropping.
Yeah, Scarlett Johansson drives a Chevy Volt. Tell me more. She's just super down to earth.
I know you have Jessica Alba in your notes. So.
I do. I figured out. By the way, in the creepy space from when I said that to now, I figured out why. She has. I don't know how it works, but her tech company, it's called Honest Co.
Yes, I have heard of that. Yes.
It's pretty successful. If she was just not Jessica Alba, maybe she wouldn't have that company, but just a person in Silicon Valley with that company,
right?
It's like $100 million in sales.
So someone tuning into this podcast is like, so this is about Jessica Alba?
Yeah,
I don't understand. What are we talking about?
It's weird. It's a Jessica Alba. That's the trick. Now we got to walk this one down the tightrope and bring it.
Become a ratings whore right off the bat. Hot ladies of Hollywood. Forget the issues that confront Silicon Valley.
Exactly. Well, this is like my 15th of these podcasts.
I've been enjoying them.
Thank you. You're a creative person. It's been kind of weird, given that podcasting is literally the least you can do. You've got what's on the far end, an opera, producing a movie, that's hard.
Sure.
Right? A podcast is literally nothing. But so I get the joke. But that said, it's a little weird. I haven't done anything creative in a while where people just walk up to you and go, "Yeah, I didn't like your thing yesterday. That one wasn't very good." That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen at work. People don't go, "Yeah, that company you're working in, that's kind of a crappy one."
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
That email you sent out yesterday, I don't know. It didn't really work for me.
Yeah, that was stupid. It was kind of a waste of time. So I guess I appreciate creative people in a very small way, when actors and actresses and producers put something out and get criticized and appear to be thin-skinned about it.
Yeah.
I kind of, in a very small way, I sort of see what they're going through.
That's how you'll know you've made it, when the trolls come out.
Yeah.
And they're just like, something ventured.
Well, I also get the concept too that, hey, somebody cares. It doesn't matter. They hate you, they love you. I do get the concept of okay, I'm just in the mix at least.
It is weird the first time that you see people online. I'm not producing Shakespeare generally, but I have done some quality stuff and a lot of not quality stuff, most of which we'll be talking about today.
Yeah.
But it is weird the first time you see in Twitter, this sucks.
Yeah.
You're an idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
That's and especially if you've had a few drinks, it's kind of late, and you really have to resist the temptation to just start, twittering back, messaging back to these people you know what, you suck. What do you do for a living? But Yeah, I try to have thick skin, and often, sadly, they're right. You know that, and that's actually the funny thing with some trolls is that, especially with some shows I do, I'll take it a little personally. You say like, screw you, you don't know what you're talking about, but then you actually step back and you're like, oh, that show was pretty bad. Like, it was not a great show. Yeah. Actually, that criticism may be valid, but come on, man, we worked really hard. Yeah. I had a show actually that I talked about a little last time, but the show that I did for Bravo called Lowell Work, and I was really proud of it, and still am proud of it. Yeah. But it was one of those things now with some distance, the way we produced it, and because of various things that had to be added in to please a million different people, it kind of was, if you knew the people in it who were the nicest people in the world, you just went, this is a great show because he's so nice and she's great, but if you don't know them at all, you kind of forget. Your audience is like, I don't know them, I don't like that person. You're like, no, I just have to explain to you, you know.
Not super scalable though.
And it was totally, the people were great. It was my fault, but yeah, you get so inside with stuff that it's hard to keep in mind. Like, oh, you don't have any perspective on this, and you don't care. You just tuned in to watch a television show. You didn't like it. That is valid.
Yeah. But, you know. By the way, where are my manners? Mike Stutz is the intro. See, this is why there's too much going on at the beginning of the show. I get overwhelmed. Mike Stutz is a writer, an actor, a director, a producer. This is in no particular order. Filmmaker. You have a feature-length film, and sometime guest lecturer at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles.
That is true.
That's all accurate, right?
Yes. If we are in court, that would stand up. Now, some people might quibble with how much, actor, sure, sometimes.
And a showrunner. I love that. That's when we just invented that like 5 years ago, right?
Yes.
As a producer of a show.
Sure, yes. It's the person who runs the show. It's very, very descriptive.
It's cool. I'm going to change my name to Company Runner. I just think it's cool.
Yeah, it's just one of those things in Hollywood. It's like putting the in front of the freeway name. It's just what we do.
Yeah, I don't
know.
So
just deal with it.
Yeah. So I have a question. I have a kind of ridiculous question, but for you.
Great.
But first, there's actually an equivalent of. I realize in Silicon Valley, the equivalent of the sort of troll. We have people who are always criticizing other companies, like, oh, those the Snapchat guys were stupid because they didn't sell for $3 billion. And it's like, generally from people, it's like the one hit wonder. Like, that guy only had one hit. It's like, yes, you had zero.
Yeah, and that hit
one
was really good. And often it's like he had one hit and 4 other songs you've heard.
Yeah, and made
$40 million. Sucks.
And made $40 million singing that song. By the way, you do the same job every day, and you don't make $40 million with it. So clearly, I'm thin-skinned on this. So.
Yeah, has someone been saying nasty things to you, Kent? Do we need to send out some tweets in their direction?
Okay, so here this will be my kind of ridiculous question. Then we can talk about a couple of things, like what Yahoo's taken on Hollywood now. They're taking over communities, a couple of things like that. But so you were at UCLA.
I was. That is correct.
Yeah. So here's what this is one of those dumb things. I was watching TV, and so movie stars, women, men, they're kind of unusually attractive. Like this is. And there's a category of ones that are unusually attractive, and you're like, I get that's why they're there. Excuse me. Then there's some of them who are just like, you're really, really good. You're also super attractive, like Natalie Portman or whatever.
Yes, Meryl Streep was a model too.
Right. How does that work? Like, is there some point in like your senior year at UCLA or something where you kind of realize, like, I know I'm a good actor. Like, I'm really good. I won the thing.
Right.
Do you have self-awareness and say, I'm also good looking enough to make it, or does someone pull you aside and go?
Well, no, acting is nice and cruel. It lets you know really early whether or not you're good looking. There's also, they've done studies on this actually with movie stars. Yeah. There is, in fact, a sort of almost a formula for that. Movie stars' heads tend to be bigger than the average person's. Right. They're really symmetrical. Their eyes are like a little bigger than yours. They basically are like you, but a little bigger. Yeah. And not so much that it freaks you out. They're not Andre the Giant, but they're everything about their sort of facial proportion is just a little bigger than you, and somehow that stirs something in you, and you go like, I must watch you. Yeah, right. And I'm not doing it justice, but there really are. They have studied it, the physiology of it, and they can go through and say, look at this person, look at how their eyes are spaced, look at their nose size, which is not necessarily a tiny nose. It's just the proportion and symmetry thing. Yeah. And so it's and I have no doubt that the studios have people who just look at people's heads and decide like, nope, head not the right size, forget it. But you are told as an actor, from the earliest time, the code is lead or character that you are, or ingenue, or there's some other terms. Yeah. But basically, if you're a leading type, leading man type, leading lady type, that's code for you're good looking.
Yeah.
That you could play the lead.
Right.
And then there's character, which means now it means everybody's good looking, so they're just like slightly less good looking and funny.
Yeah.
But it is character in my day coming up in acting was like you're not good enough looking to be the lead,
right.
and you're probably funny or quirky or weird or whatever, and so you get to be the sidekick. You get to be Ethel, you don't get to be Lucy.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, Ethel, the person who played Ethel, was always really angry because she felt she was better looking than Lucy, and may have had a point.
Yeah, right.
And she was like, "Why am I the frumpy housefrau? Like I'm better looking than her." And it was a big issue. Right. On their very, very drunken set, where all four of them were drunk all the time, which really must have been quite a set. That's a lot of those sets back then, because this is a story about drunkenness. Yeah. Dick Van Dyke too. They were both hammered.
Really?
Like, what was that like?
Yeah.
To be on that set with both the leads. I don't know if the guy who played the kid was so drunk too, but that tripping over the ottoman may or may not have been a mistake.
Yeah.
But they. Drunk and mad was the way a lot of 50s and 60s television went down.
Inside Hollywood stuff is just endlessly fascinating to me. I'm not sure why.
It's just such a shame. You think about those guys, and God, it would have just been so much easier. Or maybe it wouldn't have been as good if they all liked each other. Maybe there's something to the tension on the set made them work harder or something. I mean, that is always the discussion here in Hollywood. And I'm sure it is in Silicon Valley in terms of work environment. Whether or not it's better to have a really friendly, supportive environment, or whether or not it's better to have a sort of competitive, maybe if not mean-spirited, a little bit. You're always a little nervous. That sort of Amazon feel or whatever that pushes you to actually work harder. I can't remember. Some director said, if having a fun set made a good movie, then Smokey and the Bandit would have been the best movie ever. It does not mean because you're having fun, you're making something good. And I do wonder that sometime, at the risk of never being hired again for outing myself. I'm generally reasonably proud of the fact that I feel like most sets that I'm in charge of, we work really hard to try and have a positive environment and to me, I really don't want to dread going into work. I really do want to. Of course, there's the day-to-day issues that anybody's going to have, but it's very important to me to try to have a positive place where people can come in and feel like they can create something. Yeah. But I've never really had a hit show. Like I've had shows that have been watched. I've had shows that are, fine, but I've never had a hit. And so like, is that me? Am I doing it? And I wonder. So if you need an executive producer, please get in touch.
Yeah, I get the syllogism. By the way, that's the biggest word I'll use.
I don't even know what it means. I have no idea. Okay, great.
I heard Steve Martin use it. I want to learn what that word means.
Sounds good.
The classic thing is the false syllogism. So it's like, apples are red. This truck is red. Therefore, this truck is an apple.
Okay.
Like everything in there is true, but the conclusion's wrong.
Right.
Like a false syllogism. So it's a fancy way of saying I'm not sure being mean causes good.
But it might. It used to be when I 1,000 years ago when I played sports, I actually would typically do better with coaches who yelled at me and pushed me, and in environments where maybe not too much, but where I did feel a certain amount of competition because I was basically, fuck you. I'll show you, and I would work harder. Now, I don't know in the long run because I think that probably burns you out. Yeah, but that was like a big Microsoft thing too. They would build teams that would compete with each other, and one would win and one would lose. I think Gates went out of his way to create an environment that was competitive to get the best product.
Gates famously, Steve Jobs, although I'm not sure if you're, Steve Jobs working directly for him as one of his buddies, like Johnny Ive, how tough that is.
Right.
I think the people who came in and out of his sphere.
Right.
And then Jeff Bezos, famously doesn't give a crap about your personal life, or is famously a pretty rough guy.
Yeah, I think I remember I was listening to another one of your podcasts when you were talking to Cindy Aiden, right? Cindy Aiden, and
she worked at Amazon,
and she was talking about that, and it was like, do I have to care whether you like your work environment? Yeah. Like, is that actually important or not, or does that just keep new people flowing in and all that kind of thing? I'd like to believe that if you have a freedom to create and not feel you're just going to get shot down the first thing you say, that maybe that makes a more interesting environment. But I don't know. I have no idea. Like,
I mean, you hear that from actors a lot. I mean, in Silicon Valley, my thesis is, in the macro sense, you have a company, you want people to come to you who want to work for you, and really good people, don't want to hear that you're an asshole or you're, they want to hear that you know what you're. Well, they want to know that you're successful,
or they want to make a lot of money.
Yeah,
I mean, there certainly is something to.
Yeah.
I mean, people aren't going to Goldman Sachs because they're like, this is a great environment. These guys are wonderful.
Yeah.
They're going there because they want to retire at 30.
Yeah.
And they think this is the place that I'm going to do it.
Yeah. We've taken it to Silicon Valley. We've taken it to this crazy degree where it's like you can eat, lunches are, crafted by these magnificent chefs.
Yeah. But they keep you at work.
Right, of course, they keep you at work. And in some cases, it makes, if you see where the Google campus is, going to lunch is a pain. You need to get in your car and drive. But in downtown San Francisco, it's a little bit ridiculous. It's like, dude, walk out the door and get a sandwich. You're in the middle of one of the most lovely cities in the world.
I actually don't like that because certain production companies will do we're ordering in every day.
Yeah.
As if it's like a special treat.
Yeah.
But I want to leave. I've something that's very important to me, and I actually encourage when I'm working with other people too, is to get out, to take a walk, to get into the sunshine for at least like 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Go somewhere, eat, sit down. I like to go by myself, read something, eat, and then come back. I don't want to go to lunch and gossip about my coworkers or talk work. I want to step away from it, be somewhere else, clear my head, and then have some time to walk. And I do my best thinking walking.
Yep.
And they show over and over that typically is a better way to go at it. And yet there's this thing that, if I'm chained to my desk, that means I worked harder. And I also am not a believer in staying at work till 11 o'clock when really all you're doing is surfing the internet and emailing and pretending to work. Get your work done and go home at 7 and actually have a life.
Yeah.
It's going to benefit me as your employer or as your boss or whatever, a coworker. It's going to benefit me if your thoughts are actually clear and you actually have some enjoyment in your life so that you have a fresh attitude coming in.
Yeah.
And I do not get, and it is very much now the norm, and I know it is up where you're from and down here, that it's great. We show up and we work from 7 in the morning till 11 at night, or we don't show up till 10:30, but then we work till midnight. Yeah. And I'm not sure that's the most efficient way to go about it. And again, though, who knows? There's a lot of successful companies.
Well, it's cool if you're doing it because you're passionate about it. You're coding and
then you just do it.
And,
then it's not because somebody brought you a designer sandwich. Yeah, there are times when I work very long hours on whether it's a for hire job or whether it's more of a personal project. There are times, I work very long hours because I want it to be good, because it's important, and because you lose track of the day. You're like, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock. That's different. But it is that sitting around like, look, we have a ping pong table. Yeah. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, I actually would rather go home and play ping pong with my kid or whatever than stay here. I just wasted 20 minutes playing ping pong when I could have just gotten the job done.
Well, and it's I never get this point across, so I'll just try to make it again, and maybe the 50,000.
That's the way to do it. Just hammer it home.
That's right. Is that it only scales so much. So say you work 10 hours a day.
Right.
You can go to 16.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. Like, you can't go to 40,000 hours a day. So if you want something to be 1,000 times better, it's got to be, and you do, it's got to be something other than more hours. Like, the math just doesn't, like, you can't say I have a factory in Detroit and I make something and I'm going to work really hard. It's like, you can't. You need to hire 1,000 people. Like, you could be the hardest working guy in the world. You can't make a car without 1,000 people.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's a real issue down, not down here. I mean, across the country and somewhat across the world, although it's somewhat uniquely American. The very famous DP Wexler did a good documentary on it. And it's an issue that's very because of the young woman who was killed on the train tracks not long ago, filming a movie where it was in unsafe conditions, where this idea now that you can work crew endless amounts of hour and staff even sometimes more than crew. No offense to any crew out there. I do work very hard.
So the crew are the people who work on
crew would be the camera guys and the grips and the gaffers and the guys who are really on the set making the thing happen, whereas the staff, maybe the producers, the assistants, everybody who's probably carrying a computer is staff. Everybody who's carrying something related to shooting a television show or a movie is probably on the crew. And there are if it's a union show, there's certainly protection about how many hours you can work and those which still gets a little fudged. Right. But if it's non-union, like most reality television, almost all reality television, you do have the last job that I did. It sounds like an exaggeration, but I was working 7 days a week, and I was working probably an average of 14 hours a day, but there were definitely days where I got up and started emailing at 5 in the morning, and I was sending my last email at 1 in the morning. So I was working a 20-hour day, and to the point where I actually, someone had said in a meeting, dude, you're sending an email at 3:50 in the morning. Don't that you got to get some sleep. And I was like, I didn't send an email at 3:50 in the morning. I have been sleeping from 1 to 5, and the next night I'm asleep. And this bright light in my face, and I open my eyes, and my phone is in front of my eyes, and it's open to an email. It's not like, I just had my random phone. I had been sleep emailing at like 2 in the morning.
So
because
you found the other hours.
I did. So I was working almost 24
Productivity
hours.
tips.
And it is, you do get paid a good living generally if you're doing this for most of the jobs in TV. But there does come the question, what's fair and what's not fair, and whether it's worth it. And to their credit, a lot of staff and crew are now asking the question, is this fair? And you can't just blame the production companies and say, well, they just are trying to save money. Because the networks make, again, I never want to work again. The networks make unreasonable demands where they say, oh, yeah, we would just love it if this happened, or wouldn't it be great if this happened? Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be great means you want it to happen, and there's no time in the day to get that special effect you're asking for. Right. So now we have to do 5 hours of what would be overtime if we don't have overtime, and get that done, and that pushes our production meeting till 11 o'clock at night, et cetera, et cetera. And they're really asking for an extraordinary amount for the same money or less money than they were giving a few years ago. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, you tell me with tech companies, what the policies are. But you do get to a point, like, do you want to work a job 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week? Like, what is it worth it?
Yeah, I think people just figure out to work on the right thing is what happens. And I think
that's my problem.
No, I mean, put together the right staff for what you need to accomplish. Because at some point, there's only so much you can do, the point that I can never make, with extra hours. Like, if you have 5 people and they all work, if they go from 10 hours to 16, that's like going from 5 people to 9.
Right.
That's it. You've gone from 5 people. You could hire 4 more people, and there's unlimited amounts of capital available. Right. So you're not really proving anything by taking your 5 people up. So my sense is, if people are working hard because they're passionate, in our company we work all the time, but we're passionate about it. Like, we think that Nuzzle is the name is going to be really cool, but we're not like trying to we're just proving something by working a lot of hours.
Right. Well, and that's the thing with television, is we're not quite in the same position that we're not reinventing the wheel here. You've got a show that you're like, this is we're doing Honey Boo Boo, or we're doing whatever, which isn't bad, and I know the people who do Honey Boo Boo and they're good folks. Yeah. But you aren't necessarily like passionate where you're saying, oh my God, this is going to be incredible. There are television shows. Yes, if I was doing Deadwood, you go like, hey, like, I'll work whatever hours it takes because it's unbelievably good. Now, the irony being, shows like Deadwood are union shows and actually have, fair hours. Yeah. But
Deadwood, the HBO show, which is
unbelievable.
Has a huge,
one of the best shows ever written.
Fantastic, right? What was it, like a Shakespearean dialogue?
Yeah, he would write some scenes in iambic pentameter, and it was unbelievably well written, unbelievably well acted, and it was a Western for people who don't like Westerns, which is me. I'm not a Westerns guy, but if you have not watched Deadwood out there, give it a couple episodes. I believe his name's Ian McShane, who plays Swearingen. Swearingen is probably my favorite character in the history of television. He is funny, vile, profane, dramatic, scary. It's everything you want in one role. Yeah. Like, just watching him alone would be enough, except that there's also all these other amazing. This was a show that was on, now 6 or 7 years ago.
Can you get it on HBO now?
I think HBO Go. I think you can get like whatever they've had.
HBO because of Game of Thrones, of course. So
I don't know. Occasionally they'll kind of pop old shows onto their on demand, but I think on the idea of HBO Go, if I'm not mistaken, mistaken, is that everything they've done is available. That you
Yeah.
can go back in their archives, and there's just, and you can also buy the DVD or
Yeah.
steal the DVD or
Yeah,
whatever.
I bought
I'm
the
sure.
DVDs at one point and watched it. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
this is fantastic.
Yeah, I think maybe I turned you on to that. Maybe
Yeah.
I pushed you towards Deadwood,
Yeah.
and
It sounds ridiculous, right? It's set in the yeah.
oh, I have
it's
no
just-
interest except that I was just such an HBO junkie.
Yeah.
I grew up the little like fuzzy white, whoosh thing
Yeah.
as like a Pavlovian response. HBO can put almost anything on. I'm like, well, it's good. It's HBO.
good.
It's Sunday night. It must be, which is an
Yeah.
interesting thing actually with Sunday night television. They that grumble must have sounded good on the.
Yeah.
I'm just doing my swear engine. They found that certain shows won't accept being on other nights other than Sunday night because whether it's FX or anything, because Sunday night now means it's quality television.
Right.
It used to be the big shows were on Thursdays
Right.
because movies advertise for the weekend on Thursday, so you
Yeah.
get your highest rate. But Sundays are this is a good show. And so they've tried with a couple of shows, on other networks. They've said, well, we're going to put it on Tuesday so you don't have competition with 9 different good
Right.
shows. But they're like, no, we'll never get the Emmy. We'll never get the recognition.
I had a listener, a friend of mine,
Sure.
complain about the Emmys. Who do I talk to?
I can take your complaint. As a representative of Hollywood, I
The
can
same
take your
people always win was her complaint, and I'm not sure she was too angry about it, but
Well, I imagine if you went through award shows in general, that might be the case. That there's always a sort of favorite clique but it rolls over.
Yeah.
You do see, your favorite show, Silicon Valley, made best
God's sake, yeah.
best comedy, I think, this year, which I like, by the way. For those thinking we're conspiring, Kent does not. I do.
I don't think it's horrible. I just think the
yeah.
Veep take on Silicon Valley is better.
Yeah, well, if the argument is Veep's better,
That's
Veep's a
always the
great
argument.
show. Okay, well, wow, that really leaves so few shows that you can then go up against.
That's true.
But you do see a rollover where you don't see necessarily Modern Family for a couple of years was everything's nominated, everything.
Yeah.
And then this year, less nominations and other things come in. Girls, last year was the hot show that, everybody's paying attention to Girls. This year, I think they got some nominations, but less. You do see new shows creep in. You do see new faces creep in. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And they look a lot like the old faces, but
Yeah.
they are in fact different people. You have to look. They're all big heads, but they're new big heads. They're Emma Stone instead of,
Right.
Speaking of big head, she's got a big head.
She's gonna
Very
be,
attractive.
She's going to be big in the.
Yeah.
You'd think they go the other way and just make everyone a winner, so everyone could say, "I won an Emmy. I won an Emmy."
Well,
But
it's kind of going that way.
does
There's
it
a lot-
matter?
I don't know. I've
Does
never
it-
been nominated, so I don't know. I have more friends nominated this year than I ever have before, including a couple of folks who used to be on my staff and I'm very happy for them. They're really nice. Thankfully, they're all nice people, so there isn't someone I'm like, oh, hope you lose, which I have had before, but I won't say who it was.
what kind of things are they nominated for?
They're nominated for, mostly, obviously, in my business. There's a lot up for different reality shows, whether it's competition or whether it's, I forget what the Emmys call it, but essentially, docu-soap shows, and well deserving. They some good folks, and also DPs, director of photography, and that kind of thing. And then a couple others and random other shows. I usually have at least a couple, but this year there's a whole slew. So just reminding me again, oh yes. Right. Oh, this is my career. It's professional. That's what we just call it Professional Jealousy Day when the nominations come out.
Better luck next year.
Yeah, I've had a couple that I in my wildest dream I was like, maybe we could get an Emmy for this one, but never close.
Is there a reality Emmy? I don't even know.
Oh yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, there's several different things, editing, directing, all those things, but there's also their best host.
Yeah.
But there's competition shows, so you get Amazing Race wins every year. And then there's again, I don't remember their term. I'm sorry that I don't know the term for it. But it, essentially docu-soapy type thing where it is a Honey Boo Boo or not them, but you're following a story.
Yeah. So is the rise of reality? What's it from? Is it due to that? You were saying that it's not unionized. What's not? The actors aren't
It's
unionized.
cheap. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean it's much cheaper to make.
Yeah.
The problem is it doesn't syndicate very well. So that's the downside of cheap is you're not going to do a reality competition and then go, oh, I wonder who won Amazing Race 6 years ago. There's only so much market for that purchase, but it is much cheaper to make because it is generally non-union. The unions are trying to rectify that, but with only limited success because there's a large pool of people willing to work in it. You don't really pay the actors; they might get a stipend or something, but they are actors generally.
Right.
I mean, they're not, but they're doing the job of actors.
Right.
And we've kind of trained audiences to watch. And again, this is a wild generalization, so this does not apply to every show out there. But for a lot of things, we've trained them to watch a more poorly shot, more poorly acted television show. That now you go, oh, it's reality.
Yeah, so of course it's like that.
But there are, that it's generally on some level scripted, and some shows being 100% scripted, and some shows being, structured, shall we say.
Right.
So you are basically tuning into a drama or a comedy, but it is just not called that. It's called reality. Therefore, all the rules are different.
Right.
And you go, oh, yes, I don't mind that it's out of focus and that we fell out of the shot. And I see the grip in the background. And you just go oh, it's reality. Wow, we really caught that. She throws the glass of wine and storms off, and you actually see C-stands and you all these things, and you go, oh, that's okay. But if you were watching Deadwood and you saw a C-stand, something, or holding up a light, what the hell's going on? Get it together, people. Right. I spend all my time watching producers in windows. My favorite pastime is to watch and be oh, there's a producer right there sitting in the mirror in the window, whatever. And it's just because you don't have a ton of time to shoot.
Well, it's part of the narrative,
and you don't have the money to digitally erase them from everything. You don't have the time to do that. So
when was the emergence of you were telling me about it? It's called That American Family. Was that a PBS?
I don't think it was called That American Family. I think it was This American Family, something American Family. This is again, and I am not a historian on television. Yeah, this is my interpretation, not necessarily the public's. Although this one I feel pretty good about. Yeah, it was on PBS in the early '70s. They did a movie about it, starring James Gandolfini a few years back on HBO. And I forget the name of the family, the Rauch family or something. And they followed them around and basically did what later would become reality television. And it was done in the form of documentary. Yeah, what's the average day and what's these things. But there is no more, is the Heisenberg principle. Once you observe the family, you're changing everything about everything about them. There's no way that you just have a natural day. Yeah.
So people start.
Yeah. So and you of course want it to be more entertaining. So then you kind of goose this and you goose that. Yeah. But yeah, so it starts there, and people kind of. It gets attention, but I think it was somewhat dismissed. It kind of went away. It's not the '80s. There really isn't a whole lot of reality. And then there are different theories as to how we get to reality, whether or not, the sort of Jerry Springer world kind of gets you used to trashy, sad stories.
Is it just evolution of where the Jerry Springer show wasn't doing well, except when they'd have somebody on who got violent or crazy, and they're well, we get higher ratings for that. We're in business to get higher ratings, so let's do more of that, and eventually you end up.
Yeah, I think it's probably just as much the growth of cable networks my first jobs were for mid-level cable. Networks, and they didn't know what to program. All of a sudden, you went from 3 channels, where okay, we get that, and we're just going to run our dramas and our comedies and do our news. And all of a sudden, and again, I am not a TV historian, so any historian out there will be like, "Oh, good Lord, what are you talking about?" But that sort of proliferation of Ted Turner and other networks, you start building up. You get the TLCs of the world who need to program a lot of stuff. So at first, the first show I did in television was called The Secret World of, which was kind of a faux documentary. And you'd get you never knew about New York until, I've seen this show. And you got whatever I lifted out of a travel manual. And they didn't know what to do. But then, of course, things start getting watched. This sort of violent thing. Real World being a early leader of getting eyeballs, where it's on MTV, it's young people. There's a lot of drama, especially San Francisco. Once Puck is introduced as a character, that's kind of the first real bad guy. Oh my God, well, you can't believe what Puck did last week. You've got to tune in. He picked his nose and then ate the peanut butter. That was famous. And he was fighting with a gentleman who had HIV. So there was a good versus evil. This guy's trying to educate the public and is going through this struggle. And here's Puck the idiot. And all of a sudden, these archetypes pop up and they become really the characters that you still watch.
Right.
That you have the party girl and the nice but dumb guy, and you have these different characters that now start to get copied in other networks. So MTV starts busting out with different shows. And everybody, we gotta try this out. And over the years, then it's really essentially becomes sitcoms and dramas.
Yeah.
I mean, we just do it in a different style, but
because I don't know the people. So if they're actors or if you're writing for them, like I kind of don't care sitting in my living room.
Yeah, it's something that people they really don't care, because now it's kind of out there that it's very clear that there's storylines that you'd have to be an idiot to not know. Well, okay. Oh my God, we've got to buy a new car, but we can't do that till we feed the pigs that Jim bought last week, like the pigs in the backyard. But if we don't get the car by 5, we won't have enough money to buy it tomorrow. And whatever false stakes are there. And that was the worst possible reality storyline. Like, really, I create these.
We should go pitch that to someone.
Yeah. Get out, pigs in the yard.
It's a sure thing.
Pigs in the yard. Here's my address.
Jessica Alba may be available.
Yes,
for the.
She does love pigs. Yeah. But yeah, so I think people understand it. They get that. Yeah. Okay, sure, that probably didn't happen, but they just don't want to be reminded of it. They don't want to have someone say that Jersey Shore has a script. And it doesn't mean that those guys aren't necessarily smart enough to memorize the script. But it is that you're going to go in a bar and you two are going to fight about this and, that kind of stuff. And I'm not speaking, of course, about any show that I work on because, of course, all of my shows are absolutely real. But I did not work on Jersey Shore. Yeah. But that there are scenarios that get created that are obviously created. And I don't think most people watching would think that this just happens in their lives. Yeah. And then some shows, can get very detailed, and others just let it fly. I mean, there are other shows that they basically just a lot of the competition, the things like say a show like a Bachelorette or something, where you cast a bunch of narcissists and then you feed them a lot and stuff's going to happen. Yeah, you don't need to say you two fight because they're going to fight.
It's going to happen. It's a bunch of guys and a girl. So what's the extreme end of it? Like the hidden camera shows, like all that kind of, does it get to a point where we're just creating entertainment, like wrestling? Like,
don't you say that about wrestling, sir? That is real.
Nothing wrong with wrestling.
I mean, that's actually a good example that now I don't think anyone gets into an argument the way they used to maybe 30 years ago. Not that we would know because we're very young. Yeah. There used to actually be people arguing over, is wrestling real? It seems so fake. But now I don't think anyone has that argument. They just go, well, it's fake, but it doesn't matter.
Do you like it or
it's
not?
a play.
Are you entertained?
It's a show.
Yeah.
It's a friend of mine described it as, well, Rocky is playing on Broadway. It's just Rocky every night, in a 15,000-seat arena. You're just playing out whatever you need, your Joseph Campbell journey of good versus evil.
Yeah, that's actually not Saddam Hussein in the... do we have to put a disclaimer?
I mean, I guess the question would be...
All right, that's enough for this week. That's about 35 minutes or so. We'll be back next Tuesday with the next podcast. They all come out every week at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We'll find out the answer to that question next week. Thank you very much for listening. This has been the Something Ventured podcast.